how do we foster closer relationships? It looks at the family as a unit that is made up of relationships.
Everyone, welcome back to the second part of our conversation with Monette. If you haven't watched the first part, please go back. It was aired last week. Watch that episode. This is a continuation of our discussion, and the whole episode was divided into two parts. You saw the first part last week. This is the second part. Welcome back, Monette. Thank you for sticking around.
Thank you. So good to be here with you. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Moving on to the next question. You have a workbook, I understand, a Family Matters workbook. Can you explain what it is, what it emphasizes, and how our viewers can have access to it and how it can help our viewers with their own family life?
Thanks for asking. I have a copy here. I'll just show it to you.
Okay.
This is what it looks like. It's sort of a workbook size, and it's available on Amazon. You know, it started during the pandemic when many families suddenly found themselves, everyone was at home, everyone was working, were doing school from home. And so suddenly families were struggling because they still had to do their work. They still had to show up in sort of an office setting, but now from home. So when I started working with parents in that setting to see, can you still manage to do both, to be at home, to be there for your children, and also to be available for your work, we started developing some training modules, and then ultimately this book came out of it. It looks at the family as a unit that is made up of relationships. And so how do we foster closer relationships within the family? So it's parents with the children, it's children with children, it's parent and parent, sometimes extended family as well. The book is really giving a whole range of activities you can do together. For example, how do you maybe enhance the conversation you have at meal times? There's a whole list of things like conversation topics you can pick from. The idea that you could think of your family, you know, traditionally we think of a family tree. But if you look at it, how we have so many diverse families now, the way families come together, there are so many different ways in which families come together. So instead of having a family tree, I created a family circle. And there are some templates in the book where you can create the family circle, which could even include extended family, but it could also include extended relationships you have with people that are like family. And so you can start to see yourself more as part of a larger concentric circles that are part of who you are. And if you think of a child, like the village that we used to consider, you know, a child needs a whole village to be surrounded by, to help it to grow and to develop. Now we almost have to recreate that village, but
doesn't exist organically anymore.
So we have to recreate it more intentionally.
That's fabulous. So our viewers, if you find that what Monette is talking about and what her work involves may be of benefit to your family setting, your family situation, your work situation, your life and work balance, you can perhaps refer to her workbook if you're in a part of the world where you don't have access to Monette or any other life coach.
Absolutely. It's very practical. It has practical tips and ideas and strategies you can apply in your family very easily.
So, Monette, in your work, you talk about balancing work and life as an issue for many people worldwide. How do cultural attitudes toward work-life balance differ in different communities and different places? You've lived in many places, so do you find that there is a difference between how communities deal with work-life balance? And if so, you can maybe explain it. And also, if there are these differences, what can we learn from them? How can they help us wherever we are, whatever background we have, to make that balancing on a proper scale?
I think that some cultures, the individual is sort of central. And so the society is built around this idea that the individual has a priority over community or over the greater group. Whereas in other cultures, the we is more important than the I. And so the emphasis is more on what is of benefit to the collective will ultimately also benefit the individual. So those are quite different if you think about how in one society the I is at the center, in the other one the we is at the center. So if you look at a global reality now, you may have people that work together and that have come from these quite different backgrounds to how they see themselves and how they see the collective. So that's one cultural difference that, you know, sometimes really needs a bit of time and some opportunity to really get to know each other better and to learn what is that perspective that we each carry about what is of primary importance. Then there is intergenerational differences as well. These days, the differences between generations actually have become more pronounced because of technology changing so fast, and there's so much development that is happening all the time. If, let's say, you're at a workplace and your team is composed of people that represent different generations, and it's very easy now. You can have a team that has a consultant who is retired but who has come back as a consultant, and then you have maybe a young person who's just out of college, and they might be working in the same team or they might be working on the same project. And so there you might find quite a bit of challenge to find even a common language about just to communicate with each other. So that requires some extra attention, some extra work to understand each other more deeply. And when I'm thinking of work-life balance, one person might really consider their work, their life. And so for them, it makes no difference how many hours they spend at work, because perhaps they don't have necessarily other responsibilities that they need to worry about right now. Whereas another person, again, in the work setting, they might have a family at home, and they might have a child with special needs. And also just recently their parents have moved in because they need to take care of them. So suddenly this person has an incredible second responsibility in addition to their job that is almost invisible to people at work. So work-life balance looks very differently for each one. Sometimes the individual can make changes and can try to adjust. And when I coach people, that's what we look at. We look at where are the ways in which you can align the different responsibilities in a way that works for you. And so in the workplace, sometimes it's required to have more understanding of each other's realities and have more flexibility so that people can still do their work and be there, but at the same time, there's flexibility. Usually we will look at 3 different areas in which we can start to see, can we make changes there? One is at the level of logistics. How can you simplify things? How can you perhaps find ways to delegate things more? The logistical part, the calendar, the way the household tasks. The second area is at the level of relationships. If we think of balance, also our relationships have a great impact on how we actually feel. So if relationships at work are not very smooth or they're actually not working well, then it's important to find ways to resolve those conflicts or those challenges. If there is relationship issues at home, then work needs to be done there to find ways to smooth out those relationships and to make them more conducive to the well-being of all members of the family. If you have stress in the family, it will spill over into work. And if you have stress at work, it will spill over into home. So you want to look at those relationships. And then the third area is how you are thinking about what it is that you do and what is your why. Why do you work? Why do you have a family? Thinking more at the deeper level of what's your sense of purpose for yourself. And sometimes we never even stop to think, like, why do we do all these things that we do? So finding a deeper sense of purpose for it will start to make us feel more intentional about it and will create more satisfaction.
Right. You earlier mentioned about the I versus we situation, and that, some families or some communities, it's the I that matters, the individual that matters, and some other, it's the collective. Now, tend to think myself personally, my personal opinion, I tend to think where a situation that it's the we that matters, it's the collective approach, the equality that matters, would work better than the other way around. Now, I can't imagine in a situation where an individual puts themselves before, let's say one member of the family puts themselves before the rest of the family. How would that work? Does that mean that the other family members would be submissive to that individual?
I think it's often assumed that that woman and the mother takes care of certain things that relate to the children. It's almost like a default, And so it's not necessary to be like that. It could be like that. It's no problem as long as it's intentional. But it could also be that looking at everyone's jobs and everyone's other responsibilities and everyone's capacities and everyone's talents and interest, you might redesign the way the family is structured based on your own reality. But it requires a little questioning and say, why are we doing it like this? Is this because our own parents had this kind of relationship? Can we do it in a different way? Can we shake this up and say, actually, come to think of it, each of us, we have our career, and we don't necessarily want to assume that the mother would also be the primary responsible for, let's say, the household, right?
So basically, you're talking about the functionalities in a household, and that it can change. What we are grown up with, or what our background has taught us, is not written in stone, and that we can change that. Wonderful. That is wonderful. From a developmental perspective, how can organizations like the UN or WHO better promote unity in societies that are deeply divided by conflict or inequality? Because whether we like it or not, there are communities that are divided. There are tribes and countries and all sorts of places.
The whole idea of a prejudice is a worldwide problem. It's not in one place only. We have to eradicate prejudice because it's holding us back as humanity.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Prejudice is the root of all our problems in the world.
When we look at the principle of universal participation, the United Nations were founded right after the Second World War. And so their purpose was really to help the world at large,
Right.
To develop every nation on earth, to develop their educational systems, their health systems, all the infrastructure, etc. So the intention was really to help countries recover. Now, when we look around the world and we start to think about what sometimes a country has resources that they can extract from the earth. Sometimes a country's resources are its people. Sometimes its resources might be its beauty. But also we have to think about every side of development has a material side, but it also has a spiritual side. We also have to think about intellectual side. How do we develop the intellectual capacities of every individual? How do we allow every individual to develop their artistic side, their God-given talents? You want to think about How can we raise the capacity of every single individual so that they can contribute also to their own welfare and also to the betterment of their societies?
Very interesting. Very, very nicely put. And, especially what you said about the fact that it's not always a material side to things, that it needs to be coupled with the spiritual side in order to build the sort of capacity that would help society in general. Thank you, Monette.
Thank you so much for having me and for giving me this opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. I enjoyed my conversation with Monette, and I hope that you did too. She shared her work as a life coach, working with individuals, groups, and families. I, for one, benefited quite a lot, and I hope that it was the same for you. If you have any questions, whether it is directed to this program or directly to Monette with regards to her work or her past experiences, please feel free to ask them. Reach out to us, make a comment, and we will be sure to pass on your questions to Monette. I've also included the family workbook that Monette has created. I will share a link in the comments to the Amazon page where you can have access to that workbook. It's been great having you. Thank you, Monette, for being with us. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Take care. Bye, Monette, and bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
From scattered fragments to global unity, healing our world together.